But we're going to start out with Husker hoops. And there will be a lot to get into with men's basketball and their tourney hopes and the reactions and overreactions on social media. But we have to start with what happened last night, Nick. We have to start with Alexis Markowski with a career-high 35 points, 15 rebounds, her 50th career double-double, which just extends her own program record. She goes 6 of 9 from deep. Logan Nisley hits several threes. Callan Hake hits a trio of threes, 2 of them in the last minute of overtime, where you're thinking, run a little bit of clock. She said, no. I'm going to dagger 3 this thing right now. Down 10 to start the game, down double digits out right away in the second half, climb all the way back, force overtime, and just go nuts. 94-90, Nebraska women's basketball over Oregon at Pinnacle Bank Arena last night. It was electric to watch.
And you kind of got the idea that it was going to be that kind of night for Alexis, which it's very fitting that on a night you don't have Britt Prince. We've already talked about Allison Widener and Natalie Potts being out for the season, that you need one of your most veteran presence to step up. And you mentioned they get down right out of the gate 10-0. And then all of a sudden, Markowski hitting back-to-back threes, and you're thinking, okay, here we go, kind of settling back in, everyone else starting to contribute. But at that point, Alexis Markowski was kind of in takeover mode. And I think that when you need those, I don't want to call it a desperation moment for Nebraska last night, but you're trying to – we talked about this not that long ago. You're trying to establish the type of team you're going to be in the postseason. And you hope that the Britt Prince thing isn't, further extended. But this team is hanging on by a thread when it comes to its overall health. So to get that type of effort from Alexis Markowski, and yes, there were other contributing factors, but you can't tell the story of last night's win and just the gutty performance that this team showed without starting with how Alexis Markowski essentially put the team on her back yesterday. And it's exactly what Amy Williams, especially again in February, as we're getting closer and closer to March, that if you're that coaching staff, you've got to look down that bench and those available bodies and say, okay, who has been here? Who has done that? And that was exactly the answer there for Alexis Markowski.
Senior day coming up on Sunday. This team, going into yesterday's game, by the way, going into it, because you start to look at on the men's side, and we'll do this a little bit more, where you line up against other bubble teams. Mm-hmm. When you can play against another bubble team, that is a further separator for you or against you. And going into the game yesterday, both, according to the ESPN bracketology, both Oregon and Nebraska were sitting on the last 4 buys.
Yeah.
So that's on the bubble, trying to work your way off. Nebraska projected then as a 10 seed. To go beat a team that is in that exact same bubble position as you is so helpful, especially like you said, missing several key contributors, and one you're hoping to still get back this season with Britt Prince and that ankle injury that she had. But to go through and have that performance, get down early, get down again, fight all of the way back, have Logan Nisley go ballistic out there, obviously Alexis Markowski, but you had Jess Petrie get a big block. Like you had
5 blocks too. I mean, she was outstanding.
You have all of these things where, like, for me, it's really easy to look at, like, you look at the box score, but you also looked at the way everything played out down the stretch and in overtime in the 3-pointers, which was Alexis and Callan and Logan. But the contributions you got up and down the lineup over the course of that game, because you don't come all the way back because of one person or 2 or 3. It has to be a united effort, because guess what on the other side? Oregon's got a couple of players who scored 20+, and Deja Kelly is the real friggin' deal on what you have for those Oregon Ducks. And what Nebraska got late in the game, and especially in overtime, when Deja Kelly was taking over and you started to get kind of some doubles her way, she scored a few trips in a row, but you started to get really good rotations. You got a shot clock violation on one where you're like, man, they should have gotten an easy shot. Mm-hmm. But you had really tough defense, and you can't do that with one person. You had to do it with 5 united, and that's what Nebraska did.
No question. I think if you look at the overall offensive numbers for Oregon, at the clip that they shot, you're thinking, okay, it was maybe not the best defensive performance, but you're right. In those moments when you had to make stops in key moments like that, that they were able to do so. And we've talked about, Nisley, we talked about Markowski, obviously, too, and going over just those like the Jess Petrie performance defensively, what she was able to do, and then Alberti Rimdahl, what she did as well, coming off the bench and being able to knock down some big shots too. So this is where I think when you get into that, okay, what's your recipe for success? And there's going to be nights in going forward, whether we're talking postseason or not, or just to finish out the season, that, okay, maybe Britt Prince is back, but Alexis Markowski gets into foul trouble, or maybe one of your other key contributors gets into foul trouble. And so how are you playing without some of these bodies, at least in the moment? And I think if you're Amy Williams, you look at that game last night and you say, okay, how much more of this can we take when it comes to losing a player, at least temporarily? I mean, how many more players can you lose? But you start finding out about some of those role players that can come off and they can spark you. They're even, whether it's even a 10 to 15 minute stretch, what kind of minutes are you giving this team? We were talking about this on the men's side a couple of weeks ago with Braxton Mia's 7 minutes, which were all positive minutes, but they were necessary. So it's that type of formula that encourages you, that if you're starting to get a feel for what these teams are going to be, if and when they get to the NCAA tournament, you look at that type of performance and you can look at an elite scorer like Kelly, but also being able to have the answer defensively, to be able to adjust, to rotate, to have those closeout moments to where all of a sudden you're making life tough on them. So there was some defensive presence when it mattered, but also a lot of role players on top of what Markowski did yesterday that I think collectively, that's just a big time win, whether it's at home. And obviously, I get it. Being at home is nice. Home or on the road, you had to have that. I mean, you got to have those big moments at this time of the season to validate the type of team that you think you can be there when it comes to March.
It's strange to talk about the defensive performance and effort and give up 90 points.
Right.
It's just a strange game.
56% from the field or something like that. Yeah. I mean, that's still pretty good if you're Oregon, but it's in the moments right there.
Right, exactly. One of the worst three-point shooting teams in the conference, and Oregon hit 12 threes. So Nebraska buckled up when it was needed most at the end of the game there.